It's a good thing if the UK is going to produce television shows, which I think we hope it is, and we're not going to be flooded with American content. This kind of thing has to happen. What's going to be interesting is to see whether it looks like a sort of 5 years behind the time, when in a decade's time, and we think, oh, actually the big story wasn't trying to compete against Netflix, it was Netflix trying to compete against TikTok and Amazon trying to deal with YouTubers, and things are just moving so quickly at the moment.
I want to talk about ITV's sale to Sky and what it means for viewers. The aim is to create a national streaming champion that can compete with the likes of Netflix. Charlotte, you're a TV critic. I once was a TV critic, so I'm intimately familiar with all manners of streaming. I suppose it is a bit of a mess at the moment when you try and get all the kind of content that appears on Sky. You've got HBO, you've got Sky Go, you've got Now, you've got all these sort of disparate places, and you've got to hunt around on which of them is currently showing Game of Thrones and so on. What I'm not sure is what ITV brings to the party. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to tell for Sky what's in it for them, because obviously ITV being part of a large conglomerate, that's really helpful for them. They've been really struggling. It allows them to make big efficiencies in terms of efficiencies of scale, and also merging some of their backroom stuff as well. And they just haven't been able to compete for a while, as you well know, with the streamers. The cost of making television has gone up hugely. You don't really get TV shows made just by, or premium TV shows, I should say, made just by ITV or just by the BBC anymore. They have to persuade some Americans, basically, to give them a bunch of cash. And that is changing the type of television that we have in the UK, because obviously, if you're an American, you want to be able to sell your television across the world. And increasingly, everyone has to be able to sell their television across the world. Otherwise, the money just doesn't make sense. So, your sort of Coronation Streets and things like that, they are heritage brands. They are extremely valuable for someone like ITV, but they're not really making the money because they can't get advertisers, and it's this big kind of doom spiral. What does Sky get out of it? Sky get big terrestrial viewers, basically. I mentioned Coronation Street there. You're still getting 6 million people watching that. Sky want a big footprint in this country. They're really pushing it at the moment, and this will allow them to just be in front of a lot of people they wouldn't otherwise be. There are still lots of people in this country who are watching terrestrial television. I wrote down some numbers earlier about it because it interests me. Linear TV watching is massively down 60% since 2022, and obviously it wasn't sky high then, but still 45% of people are watching linear TV as their primary means, and this will bring Sky up second in terms of eyeballs. They're behind the BBC but in front of YouTube, so there is this big audience still there that Sky, by acquiring ITV, have basically captured overnight.
I guess the question is whether they'll have any content that anyone in the rest of the world will want.
Yeah, that's a big question.
Because all the good stuff they're getting from other bits of the world, or not all the good stuff, but a lot of good stuff. James, television, sorry, I should have explained. It's kind of like a play, but it's on a screen in front of you. I assume you haven't got one.
No, I'm afraid I actually don't. But I think that's more because I've never quite morphed out of the student habit of watching TV on a laptop. I think the consolidation of TV channels is inevitable. And I mean, the thing is, the media landscape is moving so incredibly quickly at the moment. The idea of merging together TV channels so you can compete with Netflix is going to look quaint quite soon, because streaming behemoths like Netflix and Amazon are looking over their shoulders at things like YouTube and TikTok, and you've got money into doing things like hiring Mr. Beast to Amazon to make a traditional TV style show rather than doing his own thing on YouTube. You've got people investing money in micro dramas. So I think it's a good thing if the UK is going to produce television shows, which I think we hope it is, and we're not going to be flooded with American content. This kind of thing has to happen. What's going to be interesting is to see whether it looks like a sort of 5 years behind the time, when in a decade's time, and we think, oh, actually the big story wasn't trying to compete against Netflix, it was Netflix trying to compete against TikTok and Amazon trying to deal with YouTubers, and things are just moving so quickly at the moment. I mean, there's a very interesting intervention by a senior figure at the BBC talking about how the BBC news channels increasingly find themselves competing not with other news channels, not with even what we might call traditional social media, but with news influencers, people who go on TikTok, read out news stories, and are sort of personalities mediating the news to people. It's all moving so fast. I kind of wonder if traditional TV can kind of catch up at the moment. I think especially because it's been quite slow so far responding to streamers.
James, am I a news influencer?
I think you are to me,
Oh,
and I think
nice.
you are to all of our listeners.
Yeah, well, I could really own that.
I'd say if you didn't have a qualification, it's that you're probably too factual and too responsible. I think if you sort of started spewing more misinformation, then you could really qualify.
Can do. This brings us, I suppose, nicely to a recent piece you wrote, Charlotte, about The Good Life, the sublime 70s sitcom portrayed by starring Penelope Keith and all the rest. Penelope Keith, of course, died last week. You say that suburban life is unrecognisable today.
Yeah, what a charming thing. I'd never really seen The Good Life.
Really?
I think I'd seen a lot of the opening credits, and I think that's because it used to be on after The Simpsons when I was a child. I really... Yeah, I had this sort of sudden kind of Proustian moment watching them.
You must, sorry to interrupt you, but you must find there's a bit... Did you ever watch The Young Ones? You're probably too young for The Young Ones. There's a wonderful bit in The Young Ones where they start watching The Good Life and then somebody enters into it. I think Aid Edmondson just rants about it and about how lovely it all is. Just with fury. It's very funny. Sorry, go on.
It is lovely. It's utterly charming. I didn't really know what to expect going in. So the sitcom first came out in 1975, and essentially it tells a story of this couple, the Goods, who on the day of Tom Good's, his name is Tom, isn't it? Yes, the husband's 40th birthday, he decides
Tom and Jerry.
Good point. Yeah. He decides that he's had enough. He's paid off his mortgage on his house because obviously everyone's done that by 40, and he is going to retire. And he and his wife are going to be self-sufficient in their lovely little suburban London, Surrey-ish home. And it's just fascinating because everybody is wearing a suit and tie at all times. Even when Tom quits his job, this kind of crazy maverick who's going to live off the land, he is still wearing a shirt with a collar on it, as you can tell from the fact that we're all wearing our t-shirts. That is no longer the way that things go, even for people working in banks. I think it's basically only people in insurance who are still wearing suits nowadays, and they all have this very clipped BBC English like I have. Everybody is white. It's completely a different world, and you've got sort of there's a real comedy of manners moment to it. Their next door neighbours, Penelope Keith being one of them, are having their boss over for dinner, and you've sort of got Penelope Keith going, I can't entertain a managing director at 5 hours notice. I need at least 3 weeks for a managing director, and talking about the silver coming out. And for me, I sort of think about the 1970s and I think about punk, but it's always that thing, isn't it, that the 60s kind of only happened to about 10 people in a certain borough of major cities, and actually most people are living lives that aren't on the kind of cutting edge of art and culture and revolution, and it seems quite close by the 70s to me, but actually watching that you thought, gosh, no, it really isn't.
The thing I found most upsetting about your piece, which I thought was lovely, was the horrifying realisation that I am pushing a decade older than Richard Briers is at the start of The Good Life.
Well, this is the other thing.
And he's retired.
Yeah. And he's retired,
but
also
at 40.
This show opens with all of this stuff about, and he's sort of there, he's got slightly greying hair and he looks older than you do now. He looks like a 60-year-old.
I appreciate that.
You're very welcome, Hugo. And he, there are all these jokes about how his body's going to start falling apart, and he goes into work.
He's not wrong there, to be honest.
And one of his younger colleagues has had a cricket match, and he says, "Why didn't you invite me? Is it because of my age?" And the colleague goes, "Well, yeah." And you just think, well, 40 is not what it used to be, is it? I've got a lot of friends who are 40 who've sort of got babies and 2-year-olds. They're not exactly looking towards the grave. We're all aging much slower, which I think is a fantastic thing, really.
James, look, no telly, no smartphones, live at home, tend the garden, read books. This is the life you want, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. And isn't there a goat?
I think there's probably a goat.
I think there
at
is
least
a goat.
one goat.
There is a goat.
Yeah, I'm somewhat familiar with The Good Life because my friend Thomas, when I was growing up, was a curious character who remember in his early teens he was trying to collect incredibly cheap antiques from car boot sales, and also was addicted to out of date sitcoms. And one of the things that he would force me to watch at his house was The Good Life, which when I remember watching it when I was about sort of 14 or 15, being shown this show by Thomas and thinking, this just seemed like a kind of relatively continuous, the adult world I knew. People looked middle-aged, they lived in houses, as Charlotte says. And it's kind of fascinating to watch these cultural phenomena just begin to disappear over the event horizon. And you suddenly realise that bits of the past that looked kind of continuous with the present until quite recently, you sort of turn around 20 years later and it suddenly looks alien. I had the same experience. I was back home visiting my mum at the weekend. I picked up a Bill Bryson book, another kind of genre of sort of media that I remember from my early teens that was introducing me to the adult world. Bill Bryson going around Britain, writing about it, going around Australia, writing about it. And I was flicking back through it.
Former sub-editor for the Times.
Former sub-editor of the Times, as he talks about in Notes from a Small Island, his book about Britain. And I was suddenly thinking, this is now a historical artefact. Everything that Bill Bryson is talking about in 1995 now just seems sort of archaic. And I was like, oh God, that's another bit of the present that has now kind of crossed a line and has become history.
I had a similar thing. Who's the travel writer? It's Justin Theroux, Louis Theroux's dad, the travel writer. I read
Paul Theroux.
Paul Theroux, that's it. Justin's the brother or the actor cousin or something. He has a kind of walking around Britain book just like Bill Bryson. And what struck me reading that about a year ago was as he goes around Britain, he just eavesdrops on people's conversations, in trains or whatever. And I
remember conversations.
It's so weird, isn't it? You couldn't do that now. You'd have to go up to people and poke them to get them to talk to you, but he can just... people don't talk on the train because they've got other things to be doing. And I found it quite depressing because I thought, gosh, how easy. You could get a picture of Britain without ever having to do that excruciating thing where you kind of go and bother people. Hi, it's Charlotte from the Times. Ugh.